What's poppin', people? It's Dante, going for my morning walk here in the Centennial Arboretum. Check it out, got a fresh haircut. Feels so good when the sides are shaved. It's hot as shit out these days in the summer, but this morning it's nice and cool. Got that breeze, cloudy day. It's gonna be a good one. And so yeah, I just turned the GoPro on a lot of the times and I don't know what I'm gonna say, but I think this is an interesting way to start the day, to sort of embrace your stream of consciousness and flow through speaking out loud and photographing and using video, audio, photography as a way for you to express yourself visually. And you know, it's very empowering to be a photographer, because when you're out there in the world, you always find meaning in the mundane. You know, this to me is what I find to be the reason why I find photography infinitely fascinating after a decade of practicing. I simply respond intuitively to whatever comes my way. I bring the camera for the ride and I just let life flow towards me, and I let the sort of gut instinct within me be my, you know, sort of compass, right? That sort of guides me to press the shutter at certain times of certain things, etc. And I wield the camera like a sword to strike through the chaos and put order to it in my frames. And so I look at the street like an arena or a canvas for me to draw upon, for me to play upon, like a playground, or, you know, for me to conquer. And so yeah, it's a very meditative act to make photographs, because ultimately we have a past, we have a future, but these things aren't of my concern. You know, my concern is embracing the spirit of play through the production of new photographs and remaining in the present moment, where ultimately I believe when I'm photographing and moving my physical body, I exist outside the passage of time. And I believe that this is where humans reach the peak of what it means to thrive and not just survive. Because when you're dwelling in the past or you're thinking about the future, you know, this is where anxiety and depression are born. You know, this is where stagnation lies. But ultimately motivation derives from the legs. Movere meaning to move, simply moving your body onwards into the world. This is where motivation truly lies. And inspiration, it's all around me. It's found within the nature that I surround myself in the mornings, right? I look up at the trees, and what do the trees do? They simply plant their roots deep into the ground, extending their limbs upward, reaching the sky. Why? Because they're seeking sunlight. And similar to the trees and the way that they exist and simply be, I too am, you know, operating this way as a photographer. What am I seeking? Simple. I'm seeking more light. I'm seeking to follow the light and paint with light, or draw with light, or write with light. You know, when you look at photography, phos meaning light, graphe meaning writing or drawing, this to me is the essence of photography: light on surface, and wielding the camera as a way for me to draw with light and give myself a voice. You know, to me, photography, it's my superpower. It's what allows me to express myself. It's what allows me to find purpose in life, to essentially treat each photograph like it's my last, because we are flesh, we cut, we bleed, you know, we feel sorrow, pain, and greed. We lust for the flesh of others. We're imperfect in our design, but ultimately I find that this is what makes us so divine. It's our finite timeline and the inevitable fate of our death. And so by embracing this mindset that my next photograph may be my last, I enter this flow state of production, of making new pictures, of remaining infinitely curious like a child would be. You know, when a child is born and goes out into the world and starts to experience life in the woods or in the parks, they look at the leaves, they look at the patterns and all the intricacies and find beauty in it and meaning in it, and are simply asking why. And so with each click of the shutter, that's what I find I do. I simply ask why. I'm putting a question mark on life, and I essentially want to always remain in this curious state. And so the practical philosophical idea or way in which I approach life is every single night I treat it like a miniature death, and each morning I'm reborn again like a miniature birth. And so every day when I wake up, I'm just full of gratitude. I have meat in my fridge, I've got water in my cup, I've got fresh air out in the world, I've got sunlight, I've got the ability to walk, I've got trees in my sight, I'm looking at beautiful things, I'm walking with a camera, I have the ability to see, I have the ability to hear. to touch, to feel things. And then when I go out into the world, I'm just full of this gratitude within me. And through that feeling of gratitude, I believe that you find bliss. And through bliss, we find happiness or joy. And so through following your joy and snapshotting your way through your life, I believe that we can reflect our inner child, our curious, joyous state. And this to me is where a photographer should be, you know, in that joyous state. For that is where we can make our most uplifting photographs, because my goal as a photographer is to hopefully, you know, reflect my soul in the photographs I make. And so by moving forward this way and photographing in the spirit of play, in a very intuitive state where I'm not thinking with my rational mind, but going forward with my spirit, you know, I find that I can reflect the most authentic voice, the most authentic images, and the most pure form of my soul through the pictures I create. And I think about photography this way because it empowers me. And maybe if one idea I share empowers you, that way, then I feel good, you know. And that's why I make videos. That's why I post these on my YouTube or my website blog, because yeah, I just find that sharing thoughts is an empowering way to live, because I believe that we can all thrive together if we all sort of collectively know ourselves, become ourselves, and, you know, share our evolution, share our change. You know, I think evolution is interesting, and I've been undergoing a huge evolution in my process as a photographer. You know, I photographed in color for 7 years. Now I'm shooting black and white for the past 3 years, simplifying my workflow. You know, the life cycle of the butterfly we have here on this display. This is interesting. We've got the first stage in the egg, then the second stage, the caterpillar, the third stage, the chrysalis, the fourth stage, the adult butterfly, right? You kind of have to transform and turn yourself into goo. When you go into the chrysalis, you dissolve into a chemical soup, but then you come out of this cocoon into this beautiful butterfly that can fly and has intricate patterns and colors and has the ability to fly and is free and is kind of careless in a way, where the butterfly goes from flower to flower and, you know, moves around gracefully and beautifully. And sort of thinking this way about our creative process as a photographer, you know, I believe that we can maybe look at it metaphorically, where, you know, in order to become a beautiful artist who is fully transformed and pure, perhaps it's wise to destroy and then regrow and be born again. And that's essentially what I did with my workflow and my process as a photographer. Is I destroyed all of my past preconceived ideas of what makes or breaks a good or bad photograph, how a photographer should interact with the world, what photography means to me, why I photograph and how I photograph, and have built myself from the ground up. And, you know, when you think about the caterpillar going into the chrysalis, or, you know, as a caterpillar sort of transforms into a butterfly, it's almost like a return to that amateur state as a photographer, where I never want to feel like I've essentially mastered photography, but once you figure out the standards and learn how to make successful photography, I think then you can give yourself the permission to return to your chrysalis, to go back to goo, and then come out again reborn and transformed, and, you know, in your full final form. And that final form is the child. You know, that final form is ultimately going through that life cycle like a butterfly over and over again, infinitely, so that you can essentially cultivate curiosity throughout a lifetime. Because when it comes to photography, this to me is the #1 thing that we should cultivate each day and think about. You know, we want to increase our curiosity, we want to increase our courage and hone in on our intuition. You know, these 3 traits, I believe, are the key ingredients that a photographer must possess to create stronger work. And, you know, I find that the ultimate goal is to simply increase your curiosity by 1% each day. And so I find that through getting deep sleep, through focusing on my physical vitality, everything else falls into place. And so when I'm out in the world, I have energy, I have power, and through that power that I have physically, I can walk more. And then the more that I walk, the more that I see. And then the more that I see, the more that I photograph. And the more that I photograph, the more that I chip away at life, the more curious I'm becoming. And the more curious I'm becoming, the more I'm going to want to go back out there into the world and repeat this cycle of increasing curiosity and making new photographs. And you enter this flow state where you pretty much always have the camera with you. It's always on a wrist strap. You know, this is why I highly recommend the Ricoh GR digital camera. It's compact, it fits in your pocket. It's absolutely the best camera for this kind of work, where, you know, my philosophy around why I photograph and how I photograph is simply treating it like a visual diary of my day. And so by treating it this way, I believe I can now enter the spirit of play and the flow state much more seamlessly with my everyday life, where I can go on the bus and ride to work and snapshot out the window, or photograph myself with self-portraits, or make pictures of details using the macro feature. You know, I can use the Ricoh in a variety of ways when it's simply in my pocket all day, right? You pretty much have no excuse not to make a picture. And I like treating photography this way. It's a very simple thought to simply treat it like a visual diary, where you're just making pictures because you like making pictures, and you know what you do with the photos or who sees the photos, these things aren't of our concern, right? We're completely detached from the outcome. And I think through that detachment you can find purity in your process and find joy and simply have fun, because at the end of the day, you know, that's what I seek, is to enjoy my day, to have fun, to follow my joy, and to allow my photographs reflect that. So those are the thoughts of the day. And yeah, now I will go on with my day, enjoy the day. Look at the bark. Whoa. Huh. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace, 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 peace.